Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to our critical inquiry in language studies special issue launch, centering Southern perspectives in translanguaging research. This event is sponsored by Rutgers University, Newark, and University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh is providing the logistical support. My name is Zhongfeng Tian, currently an assistant professor of bilingual education at Rutgers University, Newark. Rafi? I think you muted.
My name is Dr. Abu Saleh Mohammad Rafi. I currently work as an assistant professor of linguistics at the Department of English and Humanities, University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh.
So we are the guest editors of this special issue, just published in Critical Inquiry in Language Studies, centering Southern perspectives in translanguaging research. Thank you so much for being here with us today. So just some housekeeping issues before we start. Please mute your mic and turn off your camera during the talk. We will save all the questions to the end. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat box during the talk.
So we have Professor Imran Rahman, Vice Chancellor, University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh, and Professor Shamsud Murtuza, Department of English and Humanities, and Special Advisor to the Board of Trustees. They have kindly accepted our invitation and are here with us today. So without further ado, I'd like to request Professor Imran Rahman, Vice Chancellor, ULAB, to deliver the welcome address. Over to you, Professor Rahman.
Thank you very much, Rafi. I'm really excited that the Department of Urban Education, Rutgers, and our own Department of English and Humanities is launching a special issue of Critical Inquiry in Language Studies, which I'm told is a Q1 journal. The theme being centering Southern perspectives in translanguaging research. I'm especially delighted that our own Dr. Rafi is one of the co-editors. Rafi is, of course, an assistant professor of linguistics with us. Translanguaging, of which I know very little, but I'm told that it is a cutting-edge field of study that challenges traditional approaches to languages and language education policies. And the pedagogical construct of translanguages improves the educational outcomes of multilingual students by systematically incorporating their entire linguistic repertoires into classroom practices. Most translanguaging research, of course, has been conducted in educational context in the global north, and the global south, of which ULAB and Bangladesh is a part, remains unrepresented in this scholarship. So it is extremely gratifying that ULAB, as a global south university, can be part of this research inquiry and is able to participate in the launch of this special issue. I understand that over 200 young and experienced scholars registered to join this event, making this a significant gathering of translanguaging experts in a South Asian context. And I really look forward to the engaging discussions that will follow. And I warmly welcome the guest editors, Dr. Tian, Dr. Rafi, editors, Dr. Viegen and Dr. Lau, panel discussant, Professor Wei, some or all of the journal contributors, and the others, including my colleague, Professor Shamsud Murtuza, and Associate Professor Arifa Rahman at this launch event. So best wishes to all. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Rahman. Zhongfeng, over to you.
think you're muted, right?
নূর ভাই জংফংকে আনমিউট করেন।
Okay, here we go. Thank you for the patience. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. So we will first introduce the background of this special issue. So the last decade has witnessed the momentum of the trans term in applied linguistics and language education. At its core, it signals the need to transcend the named and bounded categories that have historically shaped our thinking about the world and its habitants, the nature of knowledge and communicative resources. So particularly this trans term, this orientation, it breaks away from the structuralist orientation, seeing language as a static and bounded entity. Instead, this discourse argues for a more dynamic, fluid, and processual understandings of language as social practice, with a focus on human agency and their act of languaging going between and beyond the socially constructed language boundaries, as well as the cognitive and semiotic systems. Also, this trans term challenges existing power structures by reconfiguring a more heteroglossic, equitable space where the voices of others are forefronted and their ways of knowing, thinking, and being are normalized. And furthermore, to emphasize on the trans term has transdisciplinary consequences because it invites different theoretical lenses, for example, sociolinguistic, psycholinguistics, and racial linguistics to examine issues of language practice and language education, contributing to our broader understanding of human sociality, social relations, and social structures. So among these conversations, the term translanguaging has gained significant visibility due to its theoretical and pedagogical promises in relation to bi- and multilingualism and multilingual learners. So originating from the Welsh-English bilingual education context coined by Sam Williams, translanguaging has been theorized, defined, and expanded as a multifaceted and multi-layer polysemic concept. So specifically, as a practice, translanguaging describes the complex, natural practices of bilinguals during their meaning-making processes, which is characterized by multilingual, multimodal, multisemiotic, and multisensory performance. As a theory of language, translanguaging aims to interrogate the duality of bilingualism and challenge colonial and modernist era ideologies of language standardization by legitimizing language minoritized speakers' linguistic varieties. And translanguaging is also a pedagogy, which proposes a more dynamic, fluid, and hybrid approach to teaching in or off language to support children's immersion bi- and multilingualism, which draws upon their full communicative repertoire and cultural and linguistic funds of knowledge, while combating language hierarchies at micro and macro levels. So it really prompts educators and teachers to reimagine and recreate a more humanizing, culturally and linguistically sustaining space to serve multilingual students. So many empirical studies as of today have demonstrated that strategic and purposeful use of translanguaging may lead to deeper and more complex content and learning, language learning, build metacognitive and meta-linguistic awareness, support students' positive identity and socio-emotional development, and raise critical consciousness about language and power, potentially advancing social justice to ensure that all students are educated deeply and justly. I think you muted, Rafi.
Yes. So in my part, I'm going to just answer these 4 questions. As Zhongfeng already discussed, translanguaging has introduced a paradigmatic shift in how we think about language and how we work with bilingual students. There has been an exponential growth in translanguaging research, with the majority of the existing studies taking place in the global north context so far. So the idea for this special issue centered on the global south occurred to me when I was a second-year PhD candidate, and Zhongfeng was already a rising star in translanguaging scholarship with a slew of awards under his belt. So one morning I hit him up to chat about how we are still missing a broader understanding of translanguaging from a Southern perspective. For instance, translanguaging research didn't previously look at how marginalized and disenfranchised people in the global South countries have different language education goals and socio-political realities. Zhongfeng was quite intrigued by the idea and asked, "Do you have anyone in mind with whom you'd like to pursue this special issue?" I said, "Well, you are on my mind." So we had a good laugh and started our scholarly venture pretty romantically, as you can tell. So in this special issue, we envisioned Global South as an encompassing term, which refers not only to geographic regions of Latin America, Asia, Africa, Oceania that have not been part of the upward march of economic, social, and political progress in while their countries, but also to the conditions of suffering and inequality brought about by capitalism and colonialism. From this perspective, the Global South encompasses individuals who may also be present in the Global North, but are excluded, marginalized, or silenced. This includes undocumented immigrants, the unemployed, religious or ethnic minorities, and victims of sexism, homophobia, and racism. So we purposefully brought together emerging and well-established scholars who are both residing in and have deep connection with the Global South contexts in order to critically examine translanguaging and language in education research with Southern epistemologies and theoretical lenses. Then we got in touch with Critical Inquiry in Language Studies journals co-editor Sunny Lau and chief editor Dr. Saskia van Viegen. We are here today because they trusted our work and gave us all the support we needed to successfully complete this special issue. So thank you so much, Saskia, Sunny, and the entire CILS team. Over to you, Zhongfeng.
Okay, so to give you an overview of this special issue, in addition to our editorial, we have 4 articles, 2 empirical and 2 conceptual pieces, and a commentary by Professor Li Wei. The papers and scholars collaborating in this special issue blended multiple perspectives and locations, paying particular attention to regions and communities that are traditionally underrepresented in the conversations. China, South Africa, Brazil, Australia, and Canada, with international students originally from the Global South countries, are represented across the papers. The papers use a mixture of methodological tools, such as design-based research, case study, thematic analysis, to re-theorize and recontextualize translanguaging as a construct in different classroom contexts, such as remote and urban ones, spanning across primary to tertiary levels, to better understanding the pertinent issues of language teaching and learning in relation to a broader agenda of achieving linguistic, epistemic, and social justice. As Rafi mentioned, this special issue wouldn't be possible without the unwavering support of the Critical Inquiry in Language Studies editors. Thank you so much again for providing the space and opportunity for us to explore this idea. Thank you for believing in our work. Today, we are very honored to have Saskia van Viegen, the editor-in-chief, and Sanyiman Chulao, one of the co-editors here. They are joining us from Canada. So on the left side of the slide, you can see our pictures taken at the American Association for Applied Linguistics, a AAAL conference in Portland, Oregon in March this year. I'd like to invite them to say a few words.
Nur bhai, please, yes, Sunny ke unmute karen. Co-host baniye den.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this introduction. And I'm going to take a moment to share my screen. I'd like to begin by saying a few words about CILS, and then my colleague Sunny will say a few more words about the special issue itself. Launched in 2003 as the flagship journal for the International Society for Language Studies, ISLS, you may recall. CILS was conceptualized to create a venue at that time, which was largely lacking, for critical perspectives on languages, language education, and related research through a peer-reviewed publication. Today, ILS is no longer operating, and CILS operates as an independent journal published by Taylor and Francis. The journal cultivates a community of scholarly inquiry and practice for alliance across asymmetrical conditions of power and privilege to nurture coexistence and co-learning of plural knowledges, and aims to sustain critical knowledge sharing among scholars from diverse global locations, as evidenced by the audience and participants gathered here today. As part of a collective bottom-up effort across transdisciplinary fields of language studies, CILS fosters equity, advocacy, and pluriversality in language-related policy and practice, research, scholarship, and education. Our current editorial team, in addition to myself, I'm from York University in Canada, and Sunny Manchu Lau, who you'll hear from in a moment, from Bishop's University, also in Canada. We are joined by Anwar Ahmed from the University of British Columbia in Canada, and we have an incredible editorial assistant who has been with us since the beginning of our tenure as stewards of this journal, and he's from the University of Toronto. This year, the journal publishes its 20th volume, marking 2 decades of contribution to critical scholarship in the broad interdisciplinary field of language studies. And notably, the field has grown immensely, accompanied by a welcome proliferation of scholarship in various subfields, from area studies, gender studies, queer studies, discourse analysis, multilingualism, curriculum studies, language policy, among others. Collectively, this research, this scholarship has contributed new ways of understanding and addressing language issues through lenses of post-colonialism, feminism, critical race theory, translanguaging, and so on. Yet Southern perspectives have remained underrepresented. Much needed contributions, such as what we've put together here, what Zhongfeng and Rafi have brought to us with this wonderful special issue, are much needed to help us consider how we can re-envision criticality in the future and continue to advance the broad field of language studies. I'll turn it over to Sunny now.
Thank you, Saskia, and thank you for inviting us. We just want to share a bit about the aims and scope of a journal and encourage contributors to continue to publish with us. This year, we have one very important new directions for CILS. The aims and scopes have been revised to focus more specifically on the fields of applied linguistics, sociolinguistics, language policy and planning, literacy studies, and education. The move aims to encourage more focused submissions and encourage reviewers with related expertise, fostering reciprocity in knowledge generation and sustained readership with shared interest. Next slide. We have also launched an annual thematic special issue. So this is a good example here. Our aim is to create a venue for publications by scholars from diverse geopolitical locations on various timely language issues. The guidelines and information can be found on our website. And just to elicit your interest, our next open call submission deadline is January 1st for publications in 2025. Next slide. We're very delighted to have selected this particular special issue to be featured in our 20th anniversary volume. We believe a special issue like this offers a much-needed contribution to the field of language education, as it highlights the importance to decentralize research from the traditional knowledge generated and focused in global south to reconsider the contributions of the global north to reconsider the contributions of the global south. We would like to congratulate the guest editors and all contributors to this special issue, and hope that you will continue your research and knowledge exchange in language education, and wish you all success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saskia and Sunny. And also, we are very grateful for Professor Li Wei, who's the Director and Dean of Institute of Education, University College London's Faculty of Education and Society. As one of the pioneering figures of translanguaging scholarship and a world-leading scholar in the field of applied linguistics, his commentary in this special issue helps us develop further theoretical understanding, practical implications, and future research directions for Southern perspectives by multilingualism and language education. We are both very fortunate to have met him in person. The pictures were taken at this year's CILS conference in Portland, Oregon. Now it's our great honor to invite Professor Li Wei to comment on this special issue.
Thank you very much, Zhongfeng, and of course also to Rafi. It was wonderful to talk with you both at CILS this year, but also, you know, through editing of the special issue. It's a wonderful contribution to the growing scholarship on translanguaging, and you expressed your gratitude, and I want to echo that to the editors of the journal, Saskia and Sunny, of course, for supporting this special issue. The journal is absolutely wonderful, a flagship publication in this fast-changing, fast-developing field. It also published one of our early pieces, the Rejecting Abyssal Thinking Manifesto on Translanguaging Research. Now, as Zhongfeng said, I provided a commentary to the special issue on the papers that are published in the special issue. Really, I should be commenting on the papers today, but because of my other commitment, I need to leave for another meeting in about half an hour. So I can really only say a few words now before you hear from the other contributors. So I won't be commenting on the contributions now because that will really spoil the plot, as it were. I want to just make two general remarks. I think the one of the key contributions of this special issue is to give the field of translanguaging research, especially in language education, a sense of purpose, or enhances that sense of purpose. Translanguaging research was never going to be the conventional type of work that describes multilingual practices, whether it's in education context or in some other context, however dynamic and fluid and all the rest of it they can be. We all absolutely take that for granted. Fundamentally, we want to be transformative, really have an impact on the way we think and talk about language, on the way we think and talk about language education. And if I may say so, education in general. So I think the work gathered in this special issue with their rich empirical evidence really give us that sense reinforces that sense of direction of travel. We are heading towards something that is quite fundamentally different. It is radical in our thinking, not starting with these race-based or nation-based bounded entities that we call named languages, not with that Western view of what language is, but actually, really taking a Southern perspective very, very, very seriously. And if we take the arguments that translanguaging scholars have repeated on many, many occasions, that named languages are a sociolinguistic reality, but they are political constructs. If we take that argument very seriously, there are real implications for the way we do research. We should be asking very different questions. We're not just modifying the existing questions or questions that people have been asking for a very long time. We start with something quite different, radically different. And that leads me to another point I want to make, and that is because we want to start with something different, quite radically different, in fact, we will have a different approach that challenges, again, I would say, a colonial view or a colonial approach to doing research in applied linguistics and beyond, and many other related fields. When we talk about the global South, we immediately assume, well, the South provides data. The theory and method are still provided by the North. And that is fundamentally wrong, and we absolutely have to challenge that. The studies in this special issue do precisely that. They're not just providing data, more data, but of course, the data they provide are absolutely fascinating, and they're very, very rich indeed. But they together also provide theoretical advancement and methodological innovation. So I think these are things that really are characteristic of this special issue. I am very grateful that the editors have put this together, and of course, really grateful to all the contributors to this special issue. I urge everybody to read them very, very closely. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this event and also this special issue. This will have a long-lasting impact on the field. I have no doubt about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Liu.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Liu, for your remarks. Okay, I'm sure now you are very excited to learn more about each article. So let's begin our article presentation to hear from the authors of the 4 articles. So you can see the order from the table here. Each presentation will be around 10 minutes. Just a quick reminder, please please mute your mic and turn off your camera during the talk. We will save all the questions in the end. So feel free to put your questions in the chat box during the talk. So let's begin with Lara. The floor is yours.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let me just start. And you can see my slides as well.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you again, everyone, for this invitation, for putting together this issue. It's really very, very exciting. So yeah, my paper is titled Relanguaging Translingual Writing in a Kailichian Primary School. So my focus will be on translanguaging in the context of student writing in South Africa. So the study is situated in Kailicha, which is a township about 30 kilometers outside of Cape Town. And I conducted a 2-year linguistic ethnography there for my PhD, and have since been working on this further conceptually as well. So just going further on what Professor Liwei just said about the South not just providing data in a sense, I would say that this study is like a situated conceptual account, which really like the theory of relanguaging that I kind of put forward also in other publications from this project was really only possible with and through the space and the context. So yeah, this is really important to mention. So what the paper begins with first tries to do is like a concept critique of translanguaging. And while I kind of very much align myself with the political and activist project of translanguaging and think it's hugely important, I do at the same time think that there are some problematic binaries that the concept somehow relies on. And I kind of provide a critique that emerges from reading the global translanguaging literature, the few translanguaging pieces that exist also on the global South, of course, but the critique also emerges from the specific concerns in South Africa. So I will just give like a very brief hint at this. I guess, unfortunately, you'll have to read the paper for all the details. But some problematic conceptual binaries that I find translanguaging as an analytics to rely on is that it kind of produces and reinforces a binary between what we could call types of speakers. So multilingual speakers and monolingual speakers, and thereby kind of in its conceptual assumptions does not 100% break away from the named language world in a sense, because it still somehow assumes that people who speak more than one language are different from people who speak only one language, if you wish. And in South Africa, this binary maps on further socioeconomic and racial dynamics, where multilingual speakers are highly stigmatized against urban settings, socioeconomically badly off urban settings, are attached to basically multilingual speakers and are stigmatized against students as well as teachers. And the monolingual white, mostly English-speaking center is, of course, very prestigious. And I just see like a kind of a problematic alignment between this conceptual binary and the local realities. Another binary that I find a lot of studies to, especially in the context of writing, to rely on is the idea that institutional language ideologies are completely different from the individual repertoires and languaging practices of students, for example. So some translanguaging studies in writing call for really treating translingual writing as completely different from monolingual writing. And I think this is in a sense problematic because, of course, the writing practices and institutions are very much influenced by this very restrictive standard language regimes that are in place, also in the global South. So I come then to argue that translanguaging is a valuable pedagogical and political vision, but as an analytics, it has some weaknesses, which then brings me also to framing translanguaging in my piece as kind of like a generic term that summarizes all fluid languaging practices. And the concrete analytics that I then introduce, however, is slightly different, which is relanguaging. So the step 2 then, of course, has to be to provide an alternative analytics. And I see a spatial perspective as actually undoing these 2 binaries that I've kind of brought into focus in the first part of the paper. So I draw on the notion of spatial repertoires, very much philosophically developed from the idea of assemblages, that shifts the focus from types of speakers to the linguistic potential that is present in particularly situated spaces. And relanguaging then is exactly a practice of handling these potentials in particular spaces. So it's a recursive practice where we can see students in their writing sorting out and bringing together the complex classroom repertoire in various different ways. Right. The paper then basically explores what such a spatial repertoire in the South African classroom context in a primary school in Khayelitsha looks like in a moment. Of course, space is also always time related, in a moment where opportunities for translingual writing are opened up. So I basically allowed I did one intervention where teachers gave me 30 minutes of their English lesson, and I shared this picture story with students and asked them to basically describe it, write about it, using whichever languaging resources they would like. So now to understand kind of this classroom repertoire, we have to know that in Khayelitsha, the language policy is standard Xhosa as the medium of instruction from grade 1 to grade 3. And then there's a radical shift to English medium instruction in grade 4. The study here focuses on grades 4, 5, 6, 7. So after that, switch to English. But what we also have to know, and what we have to, as Professor Liwei rightly said, start our analysis from, is that the students and teachers in these classrooms are often born and live in this area and have a very fluid way of languaging as their home language practices, which I call Khayelitshan languaging, which include English resources, Xhosa resources, heterogeneous terms, Afrikaans, other African languages like Tswana and Sotho. So if we now imagine what the classroom repertoire looks like if we allow translingual writing, then we see that the students have to sort out a very complex repertoire of possibilities that include English resources, that include standard English orthography that they've been introduced to, the standard Xhosa orthography they've been introduced to, but also their fluid and complex non-codified language resources that they use in their homes and outside, but also during classes in oral interactions, basically. So I just put this color coding a little bit so you can follow the non-codified in blue, the standard English in red, and the standard Xhosa in green. So I'll just give you a hint of one data piece here of what an analysis can look like if we start from the complexity of this classroom repertoire, which I try to do in the paper. So we have a grade 6 student here who describes the picture story as follows. In these pictures, the boy is vuking. The boy is choning in the river. In picture 3, the boy is swimming. In picture 4, clean. So we see here overall a translingual writing piece. What stands out as kind of heteroglossic terms are vuking and choning, for example. And what is going on here is that you have a verb vuka, which is to wake up, where then the final vowel is deleted and the student has added the continuous tense marker ing, standard English, to produce vuking, waking up. Chona, to go down in water, to dip into water, is the same systematics here. So now we would probably see this as a creative act of translanguaging. So now this next thing, swimming, this next instance of ing, we would probably see as a spelling mistake, because the student has clearly tried to write standard English in our view, but has failed to realize the second M. So now returning to the starting point of really taking seriously the argument that separate languages are political constructs, and that people speak in a fluid way in Kailicha, and then doing some Google searches and being kind of proficient in Kailichan languaging myself, I know that Ugu Swima is used a lot in Kailicha to refer to swimming. So this, of course, then changes our analytical options, because Ugu Swima is written with one M, then the final A is taken off and the ing is attached. A double consonant within a word in standard Xhosa orthography does not exist. So what we could then argue is that we can move from seeing an standard English spelling mistake here to seeing a Kailichan languaging resource, which is Ugu Swima, assembled with a standard English ing and realized via standard Xhosa orthography. So what I would argue we see here is that a student bringing together various resources, the various possibilities from the classroom repertoire, but not necessarily in the way that conform to our understanding of separate languages. And if we take this seriously and we force ourselves to start from a point of fluidity, then we can see sorting practices where maybe a fluid local languaging resource is assembled via standard Xhosa orthography. And we can this way also speak back to the stigmatization of places like Kailicha as kind of cut off from standard linguistic norms. And we can actually show that there is rather an oversupply of such norms and a lot to sort out for students in this space. Yeah, and I think the conclusion of the paper, I will leave you to read on your own as well. Yeah, and thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Lara. Yeah, I think over to you, Jiajia.
Thank you. Could you see the screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, that's great. Okay. Thank you very much, Zhongfeng and Rafi, for putting together this wonderful special issue. We are very happy to present our paper here. So I am Jiajia. I will do the presentation, and Winnie and Ivy are also here, and they will follow up with some questions later, okay? So our paper focuses on a critical examination of the interaction between translanguaging pedagogy and the students' beliefs and practice of translanguaging in learning EAP in the Chinese university context. I'll start with the introduction of the background. So in recent years, translanguaging has been increasingly adopted in the higher education context, including the different programs like EAP, English for Academic Purposes, and EMI, English Medium Instructions. Following the trend, studies have also paid attention to students' learning and their reaction to translanguaging in the classroom, including spontaneous translanguaging and pedagogical translanguaging in the classroom. However, there are relatively fewer studies focusing on whether and how students would pick up translanguaging strategies in their own learning over a longer period of time. This is where our study comes in. So our study aims to contribute to this by tracing 8 students' changes in their beliefs and practices of translanguaging when developing academic literacies throughout a 14-week EAP course. in which translanguaging pedagogy was systematically planned and implemented. And so this is our research question. So we want to examine the interactions between the students' beliefs and practices and the teacher's translanguaging pedagogy. So our study adopted design-based research and case study as methodology. Design-based research is the overarching approach for design, implement, and evaluate the translanguaging pedagogy, while case study was adopted to have in-depth analysis of students' beliefs and practices of translanguaging in the whole process. So the study was carried out at a medical college of a university in South China. And because of the internationalization of the university, they have been promoting EMI courses in disciplinary studies. And they also offer a range of EAP courses to support students to develop their research and the academic skills in English. So the study focused on an EAP course, which aims to help the students develop a literature review in public health studies. And the students are the first year students in the Masters of Public Health program. So they have, the students have good academic achievements in Chinese, but then their English proficiency level was relatively low based on their program entrance exam and the CET, the Chinese examination of the English proficiency. So in this course, translanguaging pedagogy was systematically planned and implemented so the course included 7 topics of critical reading and writing, through which students learn the academic skills of developing a literature review in their chosen topic in public health. So different translanguaging strategies like the scaffolding functions of L1, reading multimodal text, multilingual and multimodal text, and translingual practices in writing. This kind of translanguaging strategies were systematically planned in the different lessons, and the teacher also encouraged the students to incorporate translanguaging strategies for their academic reading, writing, and presentation, in a purposeful way. So we collected the students' pre and post intervention writing and their multilingual and multimodal writing artifacts throughout the whole semester. We also had class observation and had different types of dialogic data, including the pre and post intervention interviews with the students and the informal communication with them throughout the whole course. And so we mainly had the data analysis by thematic coding. So I will leave this part to you for the article. So now let me present some findings of the article. So we found 3 typical patterns of trajectories from the students. The first one is presented by the student Xin, who has deepened his understanding of translanguaging and developed more strategic practice of translanguaging in academic activities. So at the first beginning, Xin wasn't very sure. He didn't have a clear idea of translanguaging and didn't know how he could use one language to learn the other, as he said here. I think they are Chinese and English. They are two languages. How to use one language to learn another? I don't know how to answer this question. During the course, he observed the teacher's translanguaging pedagogy, and he also explored different ways of incorporating translanguaging strategies in his academic activities, including the translanguaging annotations in reading. As you can see here, that he put some Chinese annotation when he's reading English articles. And he also tried to put together Chinese, English, and some symbols and diagrams to construct the structure of his writing of the literature review. In his presentation, he planned translanguaging strategically. This is a typical one. Here, he is introducing the concept of injury, which is an important concept of his presentation. And he said he needs to introduce injury in both English, a definition by the US CDC, and in Chinese, a definition by the Chinese National Conference of Injury Prevention and Control, because he thinks it's necessary to introduce to his classmates using, the concept, the definition of the concept by these two organizations. And he was aware of his changes and has developed a more thorough understanding of translanguaging. As he said here at the post-intervention interview, he said, when I use translanguaging, when I turn to Chinese, I could better understand the reading, the author's expression. My critical thinking must be based on the understanding of an article. So if I use translanguaging, it may be helpful for me to grasp the viewpoint. So as we can see, he deepened his understanding of translanguaging, and he also developed all these various strategies. Okay, so the second trajectory was presented by Jie, who have been more open-minded to translanguaging and explored appropriate translanguaging practice, as she said. At the beginning, Jie commented that I want to improve my expression in writing, but I don't want to write Chinese English. She wants to learn the native speaker way of thinking. So you can see here, she seems to have a very strong mindset of language separation. Well, during the course, she observed the teacher's translanguaging pedagogy, and then she also had some reflection and pick up some strategies. So she started to have a combination of strategic and spontaneous translanguaging in her practice. These are some typical examples. And then towards the end of the intervention, the course, she commented that the teacher's translanguaging practice helped me to understand how actually we could use Chinese on some certain occasions when speak English. And then this gives me confidence to express and some methods and strategies to incorporate Chinese in the development of academic literacy. And another typical trajectory is presented by Qi, who also started with very strong mindset of language separation. He said, I want to write based on English way of thinking. If I want to use Chinese to write and think, I will think in Chinese way. I will stay in this level and I won't improve it. And Qi had also tried to explore some translanguaging strategies like this one. Her translanguaging strategy is mostly based on translation, and she kept having some negative feelings about this. And she said, this would, I think there are more disadvantages than advantages. I think it would make me rely on that, and that I won't develop my English ability. So that made her try to refrain from translanguaging in some other occasions, like a presentation, where she spoke Chinese, English all the time. But then actually she had some interesting translanguaging on her PPT, which she wasn't aware of. And then she commented like, oh, I think it's better to set the limit of translanguaging or speaking Chinese. If there is a limit, it can focus me to do something like that I'm not willing to. So this shows her conflict feelings about translanguaging. She needed it, but then she also had negative feelings about it. So by summarizing these different patterns of trajectories of changes, we want to highlight two key themes. That the first one is the students in this EAP course generally started the course with language separation and monolingual beliefs. And by observing and learning from the teacher's translanguaging pedagogy, some of them seem to be becoming more open-minded to translanguaging and develop some strategies, while some still are more reluctant to explore this kind of strategies. So I think as a conclusion of the study, we want to highlight that although as researchers and teachers, we believe the values and benefits of translanguaging, students may not see these advantages immediately. Therefore, when teachers are adopting translanguaging, it would be better for them to pay attention to the dynamic interaction with the students and adopt these various strategies to encourage students to learn, practice, and reflect and compromise their own language ideologies. And so to help students to use translanguaging and to be more open-minded to this. So so this is our paper. Thank you very much. Over to you, Zhongfeng and Rafi.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Since it's already quite late in Australia, we'd like to invite Joel and colleagues to present their study before we move on to the Canadian study. Joel, would you like to present now?
Sure. Thanks, Rafi, for the understanding.
Not a problem at all.
Hi, everyone. So I'd like to thank all of those involved in this special issue. It's really an honor to be here this evening and to be in such good company in a special issue. Thanks to Professor Li Wei as well for the very generous commentary that he provided. I'd also like to apologize. We're down a couple of authors, Kathleen Hugh and May French couldn't join us, but Gabrielle Nascimento and Janet Armitage will make a few comments about the contents of our paper. And I guess I would just like to kick off by saying that I think what we bring as a collaborative endeavour in this paper is trying to think about different histories of research on language crossing and to bring an older starting point than the current interest in translanguaging, which is why we use Humberto Maturana and his work on languaging in the 1980s from Chile. It's why we bring work from Jacob Nlapu from the 1940s on Bantu. It's why we bring Indian work from the 1980s, Agnotri, Srivastava, and I think particularly today, as we lose Ehiki Dussel, thinking about trans modernity as a concept that is historical, that is political, and that helps us to think beyond what is our own disciplinary space, which we are representing here this evening as applied linguists. I'm going to hand over first to Gabrielle to make a couple of brief comments, and then to Janet. And thanks once again for the consideration in the order.
Thanks, Joel. Everybody. So it's a pleasure to be here with you to speak about such a paper which was collaboratively written by many colleagues in an effort to connect our efforts, our southern efforts to talk about our multilingual moves in education. So our paper derives from our endeavor to qualify a little bit more what Southern, in terms of Southern is not a homogeneous way of looking at things like geographically, but geopolitically more. We have South in the North and North in the South. We know about that. And to speak about citizenship, agency, and reciprocity, about what you can speak in terms of our works, what you have been producing or writing in terms of our moves in our Southern context. In terms of Brazilian context, we bring the way of erasure and mobilization in terms of how we mobilize translingual efforts from our bodies. So we bring works by anti-racist language scholarships from scholars like Lélia Gonzalez, who was a Black anthropologist, and Cassandra Muniz. Both of them bring with the aspects of so important for our way to look at how we have South in the North and North in the South. That in Brazil we have a lot of teachers who are racialized in our contexts, and we have a Portuguese which is very racialized in terms of how schooling and education, in terms of what we work with, ignore and the movies from our Black communities. So we frame this from the context, bringing on context of, for example, capoeira and mandinga in Brazilian context, where we have linguists like Cassandra Muniz adopting this term to identify interactional position of Black speakers, Black users of our languages. And Portuguese, like what I've been writing about, some other spaces and contexts, speaking about how our interlocutors are Black, speaking from multilingual contexts that are translingual in many aspects. And we don't call them translingual in terms of the North. We speak about them in terms of how Southern epistemologies, ontologies are included. So I think it's something about this, what we reject in terms of speaking about a homogeneous context of translingualism. So we can go back. Okay, go now to Janet. Are you there?
Hello, I am here. I was just taking a sip of tea. I'm not sure if you can see me or hear me.
Yes, we can see you, Janet.
Okay. So yeah, thank you very much, Gabrielle and Joel. I'd like to just add my appreciation to the editors who've managed to get us all like herding cats. You've managed to get us through the process, and you know, I'd like to say that for the chapter that this group has come up with, one of the fascinating things has been to be in a group of authors from different parts of the South, the global South, and also to be writing about very different contexts. And the participation, the collaboration, the empathy, the debates that need to be undertaken to to achieve a collaborative result has been really fascinating. As you were listening then to Gabriel, you would have heard him using terms like racialized, which in an Australian context actually is not often heard. The area in which I contributed in our chapter is really in context of Anongo communities or groups of Indigenous people who live in Central Australia. And we don't really speak in terms of racialized identities, but in language identities. So Anongo are known as Pirandara or Yankanadara or Nyangadara speaking people, but we never really talk about those racialized identities. And I think that's a really fascinating area for us as a group of authors to continue to kind of, dig into the concepts behind the language. And we also found that in Kathleen's section, that there were some really interesting ways of using language about people's racialized identities. And, I think that added a particular richness to our experience, which my colleagues may wish to comment on, but it also added that kind of authenticity of Southern voices combining together to make sure that we're coming up with a collaborated voice when we completed our writing. So the contexts in our chapter are Brazil and South Africa, urban South Australia, and very remote desert areas of South Australia as well. In the particular area that I was writing about, it's very remote Pirandara speaking community where local languages are completely invisibilized in the formal policies of languages at the local school. However, they can never really be invisibilized because only the non-Indigenous teachers speak English all the time, and students only speak in English. They only speak in English at school. The rest of the time they're speaking Pirandara or Nyangadara. So the focus that we have each had in our sections has really been on local agency and the kind of dialogue across power groups that either allow or don't allow or hinder or invisibilize local agency. And in the case of the school that I was writing about, I've used the term malparara, which is teamwork or friends accompanying each other to take over the teaching of a classroom. One person is an English-speaking teacher, and the other person is Pirandara and Nyangadara speaking teacher. So the dynamic that actually allowed that to happen is still the reality, is that it's the non-Indigenous teacher who needs to have that kind of cultural humility to be able to step away from the front of the classroom and allow their Anongo colleague to take, an equal space. Otherwise, the Anongo educators are still relegated to the roles of translator, so translating or interpreting what the teacher says in English to the students who understand Pirandara, and helping to kind of structure the learning activities in the classroom, or else they're translating what the students are saying to try and help the teacher to understand what's going on in the room, because the teacher, as I said, may be the only person who speaks English. And so that power dynamic, although the sort of imposition of the English language in the institution of the government school, one would think is with English, you can already hear that the actual power sits with the Anongo educator, and the ability to work as a translator and interpreter, and possibly secondly, the power lands with students who, if they don't understand and if they don't have support, are most likely to vote with their feet and actually get up and leave the room. So, you know, there are a lot of things, a lot of complexities with classrooms in such situations. So I'll leave that there. I'll throw back to Gabrielle and Joel if they'd like to make any other comments.
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I understand it's super late here. Okay, so
Yes.
now we invite the last group. I think Wen and Justin, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I see. Can everyone see the screen now?
Yes, we can see and hear you. Hello, Wenchi.
Wenyangzi, you're frozen. I think
Probably
there's a
Justin, you can share the slides if you have it.
right. Okay. Can I just share the screen, or how can I stop?
Yeah.
Oh, that's unfortunate. I think there's a
Yeah, I
technical.
think you can do it now.
Okay. Okay, when Youngji just texted me saying her internet is off. Sorry about that. Okay. Give me a second. I am looking for the slide. Okay. Okay, I found it and I'll share it. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Hello, I am sorry for the technical issue. I am Justine John, and Wen Youngzi was trying to share the screen, and she wanted to speak first, but then there's a technical issue, so I will start the presentation today. Thank you so much for this space and the opportunity to share our research results. And thank you so much for these wonderful presentations by all the three author groups. They are very inspiring. So our research was done in Toronto. And there were two research questions. First of all, what are the experiences of international students from the Global South with translanguaging in higher education? So we looked into their experiences of translanguaging in higher education context in Canada. And secondly, we looked at the recommendations that they made. So what recommendations do international students from the Global South make on how translanguaging can be implemented in higher education? So the context was, like I mentioned, it's a pseudonym. It was done in City University, which is a major Canadian research-based university in Toronto, Ontario. And 15 graduate students participated in this research, and they were master's students and PhD students who were international students from the Global South. And they were all in a graduate education faculty. Oops. And we used semi-structured interviews. The length varied depending on the conversation. So it was between 60 and 90 minutes. And then after we transcribed all the data, recording data, we analyzed by the thematic analysis. Particularly, we used Brown and Clark's theoretical thematic analysis approach. So there were findings, and there were two sections of the findings. First of all, we discovered how these international graduate students' translanguaging experiences were in higher education context, and then the recommendations that they made through the research. Interestingly, they reported that their translanguaging practices in their faculty were restricted only in informal academic spaces. So we saw the challenges that international graduate students experienced in higher education, still that they needed to be familiar with this concept of translanguaging. And also many students were questioning if it is okay to use multiple languages during the courses in the classroom spaces. So their translanguaging practices were basically like secret talk, or through the conversations where the instructor was not there. So many participants kind of concerned about this translanguaging experiences, because they were informed of translanguaging pedagogies and theories in many settings. However, they couldn't see open, public, and formal translanguaging practices implemented in the classroom situations. And also, they reported that their experiences varied depending on the course instructors. So course instructors could have different beliefs and different pedagogies that they were implementing in the courses. However, because of the variety of the translanguaging practices and beliefs that the course instructors reflected through their courses, the research participants experienced the different attitudes of course instructors toward translanguaging practices. So as the recommendations, there were 4 different recommendations that international graduate students made. First of all, international graduate students strongly affirmed that translanguaging was a right for multilingual students. For instance, Jackie mentioned English-only practices in universities violated the basic human rights of multilingual students. And many research participants expressed that translanguaging practices welcomed their languages and cultures openly in their courses whenever they experience the translanguaging experiences in the courses. Secondly, our participants recommended incorporating translanguaging pedagogies into course curricula and resources. For example, Valentina and Agnishakat recommended that instructors use multilingual articles, which in another research study the scholars did. And also resources in different languages in the course curricula formally. And also they suggested introducing and representing diverse perspectives, even conflicting perspectives and scholarships from around the world, so that graduate students can develop critical thinking skills while understanding diverse perspectives from different scholars and different educators in the world. Also, they suggested that instructors could encourage students to write bilingually, for example, Spanish and English or Mandarin and English. In that way, they believed that the writers could reach a wider audience, and also, importantly, to push back against English-only norms in publishing. So the participants recommended through these strategies, instructors can center the languages, cultures, knowledges, and multilingualism of the students from the Global South in their courses. Thirdly, they recommended diversifying course instructors, writing advisors, and staff from different ethnic and cultural backgrounds. For instance, Ariel mentioned that hiring more linguistically and culturally diverse course instructors, workshop facilitators, and writing advisors is incorporating diversity and equity in the classroom. Tina also suggested that hiring instructors who spoke more languages would be beneficial in providing them academic and emotional support to the students from various nationalities. And Valentina also emphasized that linguistically diverse writing advisors and staff could support international graduate students with their different struggles and their different needs from those of domestic students. Lastly, they recommended implementing pedagogical translanguaging training programs, not only for course instructors, but also for prospective teachers who are graduate students who want to become language teachers. So as a conclusion, we argue that course curricula and school policies and all different types of student supporting practices for international graduate students should consider and reflect their multilingualism and their diverse epistemologies from the Global South. And also, international graduate students' needs are very diverse, so their multidimensional needs should inform the design of a translanguaging pedagogy in university courses, and as well as student supports and supporting services for them as well. Thank you so much for listening. Again, we are honored to present our results from our research, and I appreciate all the presentations of other authors as well. We were Wenyangzi and Justin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin and your team. Since we are running behind time, we are not doing the question and answer session today, but definitely it is disappointing, but you can definitely write to the authors, also the editors as well. Now, I would like to request Professor Shamsud Murtuza to deliver the closing remarks. During my undergraduate studies, I had the privilege of being taught by him, and I have since been closely following his footsteps. Over to you, Professor Murtuza.
Oh, thank you, Rafi, and that picture brought back memories. And I was listening to all the speakers, and I'm really humbled and honored to be here this morning. I'm in Toronto right now, just like our colleagues who just presented before me. And just yesterday, going through Vaughan Mills Mall, I was wondering, the polyphonic walk, so I had the same experience, maybe in a mall at Bangkok or in Ankara, or any other places in the world. So the demography of the world is changing. So you cannot go to a place and not hear different languages, so coming from different walks of life and different strata. And that is exactly what we have been hearing now. So our approach to language needs to change because the world is changing. So it's a real pleasure and privilege to be present at the launch of this special issue of critical inquiry in language studies, so centered around the theme centering Southern perspective in translanguaging research. So my heartfelt gratitude to the guest editors, Dr. Zhongfeng Tian, and my student turned colleague, Dr. Abu Saleh Mohammad Rafi. I would also like to extend our deepest appreciation to Professor Liu of UCL and other paper presenters. Now, throughout the session, we have heard about an inclusive global approach to language studies. So the dedication and vision of the authors have given rise to a collection of diverse voices, shedding light on southern and peripheral perspectives that have long been underrepresented in translanguaging research. So the special edition of Critical Inquiry has created an intellectual platform, so if I may say, and reminding us of the importance of collaboration, inclusivity, and most notably, decolonization, as Professor Li Wei was saying, in the field of language studies. And at the same time, if I heard correctly, so we talked about fluidity of translanguaging and also about the human agency. So we also heard that there is a danger of branding Global South as a homogeneous category. So these are all important issues. So the core essence of this special issue lies in the collective effort. I was just browsing through the articles, in the Taylor and Francis website, but I do not have full access, so which I'll ask Rafi to share the link at some point. So to decolonize research methods and create tools that are more appropriate in a multilingual setting. So for a long time, we have been dealing with this bilingual setting with Bangla only or English only debate, and especially in a country like us where the nation is named after language, Bangladesh. So the country where, or the land where Bangla is spoken. So it's very difficult to think of this binary. And so I think this pedagogical tool offers a third avenue, which can be very relevant for us, and especially, of course, in other parts of the Global South. So it is, of course, a call to action, a reminder that the narratives, experiences, and linguistic diversity must no longer be marginalized or treated as peripheral in academic discourse. So it was refreshing to see the birth of new methodologies through collaborative efforts. And I'm sure this issue serves as a testament to the transformative power of collaboration. So we have seen scholars from different continents and to be on a virtual platform. So that is the greatest testimony of collaboration and the resilience of the human spirit when faced with the challenges of decolonization. So I'm sure the case studies provided here will encourage scholars to think and reflect on these ideas and incorporate them in their own work. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. And thank you for making ULab a part of this great initiative. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Zhongfeng, over to you.
Sure. Okay, again, thank you. Thank you all very much for being here again today. We hope you enjoyed the event. If you have more questions, please feel free to email us or the authors. So you can see our contact information is here. So meanwhile, we invite you to scan the QR code here to read the editorial, the 4 articles, and Professor Li Wei's commentary. If your university doesn't have access to these articles, please feel free to email us, and we are more than happy to share the copies with you.
I would also like to thank the ULab academic and administrative staff, the TAs for their assistance, and the ULab IT team for the smooth broadcast of this program. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.